We are all taught one fundamental, unbreakable rule of physics in school. Energy can never be created and it can never be destroyed. It is an absolute law of the universe. Yet, every single day, millions of living creatures die.
So, what exactly happens to the trillions of joules of energy that powered a living creature? Does it just disappear? Does it somehow leave the body and float away? Does it transform into something else entirely? What happens to the electricity that was firing in the brain just moments before? Where does all that body heat go? And is the famous conservation of energy law really connected to death in the way so many people think it is? Today, we are going to trace the exact journey of biological energy after a heart stops beating, and we are going to answer this question using biology, chemistry, and physics. No spiritual speculation, no supernatural theories, just the pure, fascinating science of what actually happens to energy when a living creature dies. To understand where this energy goes, we first have to correct a massive misunderstanding about what the word energy actually means. When you look at any living creature, you are looking at several distinct forms of energy at work. There is chemical energy locked in the cells. There is electrical energy pulsing through the nervous system. There is thermal energy keeping the organism warm, mechanical energy moving its muscles, and potential energy waiting to be used. But we need to make one incredibly important clarification right now. Living creatures are not made of energy. That is one of the biggest misconceptions on the internet. We are not glowing orbs of pure energy trapped in biological suits. Rather, all living creatures are biological machines that constantly transform energy. They take it from their environment, use it, and release it. Think of a living body as an incredibly complex, highly efficient energy conversion machine. It all starts with the food an organism consumes. The digestive system breaks that food down into glucose. That glucose is sent to the cells, where tiny powerhouses called mitochondria use it to manufacture a molecule called ATP. ATP is a cellular fuel that drives absolutely everything a living creature does. It powers a contraction of muscles, the processing power of the brain, the rhythm of a heartbeat, the expansion of lungs, and the relentless patrols of the immune system. To give you an idea of a scale, an average adult human only has about 50 grams of ATP in their body at any given moment. But because the body is constantly burning and recycling it, it actually turnovers roughly 50 to 70 kilograms of ATP every single day. Living creatures are constantly burning fuel just to stay alive. So what about the electricity? People always ask about the brain and the nervous system. The biological electricity inside a living creature is very real, but neurons are not tiny batteries storing a charge. Instead, biological electricity is generated by the constant movement of charged particles, specifically sodium and potassium ions. Cells spend huge amounts of ATP pumping these ions back and forth across their membranes to create what is called a membrane potential. When a nerve fires, channels open, ions rush in and out, and an electrical signal, an action potential, shoots down the nerve to release neurotransmitters. The most crucial thing to understand here is that a brain isn't storing electricity like a capacitor. It is continuously, actively generating these electrical signals second by second, as long as it has a supply of oxygen and ATP. When a living creature dies, there is a very specific cascading timeline of biological failure. Let's look at 0 seconds. The heart stops beating. Instantly, blood circulation stops. Because blood is no longer moving, oxygen delivery to the cells abruptly halts. Without oxygen, the mitochondria cannot perform cellular respiration, which means ATP production completely collapses. Without ATP to fuel the machinery, the cells begin failing. The molecular pumps that move those sodium and potassium ions around stop working entirely. Because the pumps freeze, the electrical signals instantly disappear. Brain activity ends. It doesn't fade into the ether. The active process that was creating it simply shuts down, much like a factory going dark when the power plant goes offline. This brings us to one of the biggest mysteries people wonder about. Where does the electrical energy go? The answer is elegantly simple. Remember those sodium and potassium ions? When an organism is alive, its body spends massive amounts of energy keeping them separated to create electrical gradients. But when it dies and the pumps stop working, those ions just naturally leak back across the cell membranes until everything is balanced out. As those electrical gradients gradually dissipate, the stored electrochemical potential simply becomes tiny amounts of heat. That is it. Nothing flies away. No mysterious spark of energy leaves the body and travels into the universe. The electrical difference just neutralizes, releasing microscopic amounts of thermal energy into the surrounding tissue. Speaking of thermal energy, let's talk about body heat. This is a massive amount of energy that people rarely think about. A normal, warm-blooded creature, for instance, maintains a temperature well above its environment. According to the laws of thermodynamics, heat naturally flows outward from a warmer object to a colder environment until they match. When a creature dies, its body simply stops generating new heat. The heat it already has begins radiating outward. It transfers into the air through convection, into the ground through conduction, and out into the environment as invisible infrared radiation. That thermal energy is completely absorbed by the physical environment around it, warming up the immediate area by a fraction of a degree. But what about the massive amount of chemical energy left behind? Just because a heart stopped doesn't mean the body is empty. A biological body still contains vast amounts of calories locked away in proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Those molecules contain a vast reservoir of chemical energy. Because the organism can no longer use this fuel, the natural process of decomposition takes over. This chemical energy doesn't disappear, it simply becomes the fuel source for entirely different forms of life. This is where the hidden workforce of nature steps in. It starts on a microscopic level. The bacteria that already live inside the gut begin breaking down the cells, using the remaining chemical energy to multiply. Then, fungi join the process. Soon, insects play their part in breaking down complex tissues. Eventually, this energy moves into the soil, where it is absorbed by plants. Those plants are then eaten by animals. The chemical energy that once belonged to one creature is slowly, methodically dismantled and redistributed throughout the entire ecosystem. It is a stunning display of energy moving through nature in a continuous, unbroken chain. At this point, we need to make a crucial distinction that trips up a lot of people: the difference between matter and energy. Many people confuse the two when talking about what happens after death. Matter is the physical stuff a creature is made of. It is the carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen atoms. Energy is the ability to do work, the heat, the movement, the chemical bonds. When a living creature dies, the matter remains. The atoms are still there. They just get rearranged by nature. The energy also remains, but it changes form and is scattered into the environment. Understanding the difference between atoms and the energy that moves them prevents a lot of the common misconceptions surrounding death. Now, finally, we can return to that famous rule we started with, the law of conservation of energy. Most videos about this topic start right here, but placing it here makes much more sense, because now you actually understand what biological energy is. The law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. And as we have just seen, the biological process of death perfectly obeys this law. The thermal energy dissipates into the environment. The electrical energy neutralizes into microscopic heat. The chemical energy is consumed and transformed by microbes and the ecosystem. The energy doesn't disappear. It rigorously, flawlessly changes form. This entire process is driven by one of the most powerful forces in physics: entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder in a system. Life is essentially a constant, exhausting battle against entropy. A living body takes in energy to maintain complex order against the chaos of the universe. Death is simply the moment that constant energy input stops. Without new energy coming in, nature takes over and returns everything toward a state of equilibrium. The highly organized machine breaks down into disorganized heat and scattered molecules. It is a beautiful, inevitable piece of thermodynamic science. Because this topic bridges science and the profound mystery of death, we have to talk about what science does not say. This is incredibly important for clarity. You will often see claims that consciousness is a form of energy or that the soul is made of electromagnetic energy. Some people argue that quantum physics proves an afterlife or that the conservation of energy proves reincarnation.
While these are comforting ideas, we have to be honest, these claims go far beyond what established science can actually support. Science measures thermal heat, chemical bonds, and electrical gradients.
Consciousness is not a measurable form of physical energy in the way that ATP or body heat are. Respectfully, physics and thermodynamics describe the physical universe. They do not provide scientific proof of a spiritual afterlife.
But when you zoom out, the reality of what science does prove is actually breathtaking. Think about the Earth from space.
The energy that once powered a heartbeat, thoughts, and movements doesn't just vanish into the void. It eventually becomes heat, lingering in the atmosphere. It becomes nutrients, enriching the soil. It becomes the vital energy that powers a colony of microbes, a patch of grass, or a wild animal. Nothing is ever wasted. Nature is one massive, completely closed, continuous cycle of physical transformation. Every living creature is participating in an ancient thermodynamic loop. Every single heartbeat, every movement, every breath ever taken by a living organism was powered by energy simply borrowed from the universe. When life ends, that energy doesn't vanish. It simply leaves temporary possession and begins another journey. It continues not as memories and not as consciousness, but as a vital part of the endless churning transformation that has powered our planet for billions of years. Understanding the cold, hard physics of death doesn't make life smaller. If anything, knowing that all living creatures are deeply physically woven into the fabric of the cosmos makes every moment of life far more extraordinary.